You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
It's Tuesday. I started to say it's Monday, but it's Tuesday, isn't it?
It's definitely, yes, it's Tuesday.
It's Tuesday, November 10th, and tomorrow is November 11th, and we observe Veterans Day here in the United States, and we're very thankful for those who have served so faithfully and served so dutifully as well. And we have the opportunity to talk with one of the newest veterans among us. So looking forward to sharing that story with you today. Thanks to Concordia University, Wisconsin for your support of the Coffee Hour. Find out more about Concordia University, Wisconsin at cuw.edu.
Live uncommon.
Joining us today, Chaplain Eric Malmstrom, Navy retired, and I believe that retired addition to his title just happened yesterday, or just in the last couple of days, if I remember correctly. Chaplain Malmstrom, thanks so much for joining us today.
Good morning.
So am I right? Was your retirement just in the last couple of days?
It was. I had my retirement ceremony last Friday. And in military terms, I started what we call terminal leave. And it sounds awful, but what it means is that I'm on leave until I'm officially retired, which will be March 1st.
Aha. So you're on terminal leave, so that doesn't make you officially retired then yet. Okay. So I could follow that. I got to learn all these military terms. Well,
we speak our own language for sure.
Chaplain, share with us, how did you find your way to serving as a chaplain?
Well, that's a great question, and it's not a straight line for sure. I remember I started off in college out at it used to be Christ College Irvine, now Concordia Irvine, and I remember reading an article back then. It was an article in the Lutheran Witness about a guy by the name of Garricky, Chaplain Garricky, and he was the chaplain to all of the war criminals in Nuremberg. There's a recently published book about that mission at Nuremberg. And I remember reading that article and thinking, oh my goodness, that's a pretty profound way of, or pretty profound story of preaching the gospel of Christ to those that most need it, and those that are who've sinned greatly for sure. And that kind of went in the back of my mind. But I went on to enlist in the Navy, served as a nuclear electrician for about 6 years. I was on submarines, an old 594 boat, the USS Paddock. And when I got out, I was kind of floundering around trying to figure out where to go. And I went to a church. It wasn't an LCMS church. It was an ELCA church, but it was Easter Sunday. Remember it vividly. The sermon was terrible. The sermon was all about puppies and kittens and gardens and new life, and he didn't mention the resurrection once. So I was fuming. I was furious, and it was like a slap across the forehead that said, "Well, knucklehead, go off to the seminary and make sure that people hear the gospel on Easter Sunday." So went off to Concordia Irvine. And when I first showed up, everybody said, "Hey, you'd make a great Navy chaplain." And I said, "No way. I just got done with 6 years. I'm not going back to the Navy, not going back to the military, want nothing to do with it." So kind of put that out of my mind. Went up to the seminary at Fort Wayne, where I met one of the professors there. He was, I think, a young lieutenant, maybe a lieutenant commander, who was one of the professors there. Dan Guard, and he pestered me every single day until I finally gave in to him and went off to chaplain school in '98. So that's kind of how my path went. Then when I went to the parish, I ended up serving on the reserve side. I served with the 3rd Battalion, 25th Marines on the reserve side. That was back in 2005. Included some time in Iraq. And following that, I went back on active duty. So it certainly wasn't a straight line to get me on board as a chaplain. It took a lot of twists and turns along the way.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for your service and for all of those years of sharing the gospel with our servicemen and women who do so need to hear that when they're on the battlefield. Who were some of the people you mentioned? Dan Gard, he's a wonderful, wonderful man. Who are some of the other people that were instrumental in guiding you along this very curvy path?
Let's see. John Woolrobbie was another one. He was one that I served with. I was with the Seabees for a bit, and he was my supervising chaplain. And then when I was trying to decide whether to go back on active duty or not, and he was my supervisor once again. I got a call from what we call the detailer. He's the person, he or she is a person that tells us what our next job is going to be. And they said they wanted to send me to Dahlgren, Virginia. And I thought, what do I really want to go to Dahlgren, Virginia? Where the heck is it? What's this about? And I was praying about it. And about 30 seconds after I got off the phone from the detailer, John Woolrobbie called me up and said, "You need to go active duty because I need you here. You'd be a great person for this billet, and we really need you here." So he was a great mentor for me, as well as Greg Todd. He's been a great mentor for me throughout the years and helped me and encouraged me in many ways. So I've had a number of mentors who've helped me out quite a bit.
Well, you've shared already a couple of stories in the ways in which you were given to serve in the armed forces. Do you have more stories to share with us? I mean, that's what we want to hear today, the stories of your service and what you learned along the way.
Oh, absolutely. Lots of stories of service. One of the, again, talking to the detailer when I was coming on board on the reserve side, I called him up and said, what do you have? And he said, well, I've got a Marine Corps billet for you, 3rd Battalion, 25th Marines. And I said, well, what else do you have? And he said, well, I've got 3rd Battalion, 25th Marines. I said, is there anything else? And he said, yeah, I've got 3rd Battalion, 25th Marines. So I said, well, I suppose I'll take that one. And he said, well, you'll love it. They're these cold weather ninjas. I hope you like cross-country skiing. You're going to be going to Norway. You're going to do all kinds of cool things. And I said, oh, that sounds wonderful. So I showed up and asked them about this cold weather ninja stuff. And they looked at me like I had 3 heads. And they said, Jeff, we're going to Iraq. We're not going any place cold. We're going to Iraq. So I don't know if you remember 2005. That was in military terms, it was a very kinetic time then. We were the hardest hit Marine Reserve Battalion out of the entire Iraq War. We took 48 casualties, 48 KIA, and several hundred wounded while we were there. So it was a pretty intense time and a crucial time to have the gospel for a lot of these guys. The Easter Sunday there were some that was the last word of God that they heard before they met Christ. So it was pretty humbling, pretty moving to think about that in hindsight that so many of these guys, and that's what I learned in seminary. One of the things Dr. Gard used to always teach us was preach every sermon thinking that this is the last gospel that somebody's going to hear, because you never know. And that was certainly the case. That many of these guys, that was the last time they heard the gospel. But it was lots of emotional scars that come from that kind of service. But also a privilege from being there. There were probably one of the more difficult times. We took a couple times where it was what we called the mass casualty. The first one was quite a doozy. I think we lost 5 guys that day, but it was the Saturday before Mother's Day, And I remember, praying over their remains, putting them in body bags, identifying who they were, and putting them on a helicopter to send them home. And I just remember thinking, my gosh, these 5 moms are going to wake up tomorrow to the worst Mother's Day of their lives. So it's sometimes a pretty difficult ministry that we deal with. So from there, the next worst one, I think we lost 14 guys in one incident. There was a track that was hit by a mine, and that was another very difficult time as well. Trying to figure out what do you say to the one guy that survived the whole thing. There was one guy out of a whole squadron that survived that, and trying to figure out what do you say to somebody like that, and thinking, wow, I'm way out of my league here. I have no idea what to do because I'm still reeling myself from everything. And it was interesting that at that time, one of my former parishioners, happened to send me a letter, and it's it takes a couple of weeks for those things to come around. So she had no idea any of this stuff happened, but she sent me this letter that said, "Isn't it great, Pastor, that out of all the pastors in all time, in all places, that God sent you there to be with these guys?" And it was just that encouragement that I needed at that time to help these guys through it, to help them kind of navigate these really difficult, muddy waters, along with trying to process. Okay, how do you talk to somebody who's going to go out and kill somebody? How do you talk to these sniper teams that are getting ready to go out and take out bad guys? And what do you do with that? It's a hard thing to kind of know how to navigate those muddy waters and be able to give them the peace of Christ and give them the assurance of the gospel as they go out to do these terrible things.
Mm-hmm. All of these. Go ahead, yeah.
Oh, I was going to say I've got lots and lots of other stories as well. So I went on from there to ended up at Walter Reed eventually. So went into the hospital ministry side of things. So got to talk to a lot of people that were there were a few World War II vets, some Korean vets, some Vietnam vets, as well as the more current people that were suffering injuries. So got to talk to a lot of people. So there's certainly no shortage of stories.
Absolutely. And we would love to hear more, but we have to take a quick break. We are talking with Chaplain Eric Malmstrom, U.S. Navy, recently retired. We will come back right after the break with more stories. I'm Sarah Gulseth.
I'm Andy Bates.
Our listeners and supporters are talking about Worldwide KFUO.
Yeah, I think your programming is just wonderful. I love the emphasis on the traditional tunes rather than the modern music. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
To leave a message on the KFUO comment line, call 314-996-1542. That's 314-996-1542. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere. Worldwide KFUO.
How do I keep my kids in church? Will there still be a church for them to go to? New people have moved into my neighborhood. How do I reach out to them?
Our challenges are many, but it is Jesus who makes disciples for life through his church. Let's come together as the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod to discuss this joyful work. Learn more about the Making Disciples for Life initiative at lcms.org/makingdisciples. Again, that's lcms.org/makingdisciples.
The Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, on behalf of Concordia Plan Services, Lutheran Housing Support Corporation, Concordia University System, Lutheran Church Extension Fund, the LCMS Foundation, and Corporate Synod, daily reaches out to our members and partners, working together to support our local, global, and international ministries, church workers, and LCMS initiatives at large to carry the mission forward and to serve each other in love. Opportunities to serve, lcms.org/careers.
Welcome back to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
Today we're talking with Chaplain Eric Malmstrom, Navy retired and recently retired, and sharing just stories that, for me, listening as someone who's never served in the military, someone who's never been in combat, these stories really humanize the harsh things that one has to face, the harsh realities one faces in combat and in service to your country. And I'm sure the days that you described sound like some of the most difficult days of your career and your life. What would you say was the most rewarding times of your career in the Navy?
Well, there's again lots of rewarding times as well. One of the Marines that I served, he was a Lutheran, and I came rolling into one of these locations out in the middle of nowhere, and you could still smell the gunpowder. You could see the results of a gun battle that had taken place. You can see the bad guys picking up what was left of some of their buddies and things like that as they retreated. And I came rolling into this location, and this Marine covered in muck and mire, he came up to me and said, "Chaps, is there any way we can have communion?" And I just happened to have a communion set. So I grabbed some, there were some ammo cans, and made a little makeshift altar where I was, pulled out my combat communion kit, and offered communion to these Marines right after a gun battle. That event was so meaningful for him that he ended up going off to seminary and is now serving as a chaplain himself. So just knowing that and seeing that play out over the years was pretty incredible, and a very, very rewarding, very profound impact of that. I didn't even realize it at the time. I did what pastors normally do. I offered word and sacrament. But because of where that was and because of the timing, that had such a profound impact on that young man that he's carried that with him, even today. Definitely one of the prouder moments for sure. And lots of other very small ones, just very meaningful interactions with some of the folks out at Walter Reed, and they kind of all blend together now. But just sitting down and talking with people, while they're hurting, and giving them that salve of the gospel was very, very satisfying to be able to do that. I know one of the really neat stories. After you've been in for a while, you kind of get a big network. And I was serving with the Coast Guard, and one of the members called me up. She was in Las Vegas because her father was dying, and he was moments from death. And she said, "Chaplain, I can't get any chaplain come in to talk with me. Can you help me?" And so I'm out in Virginia at the time. So I find the number for a chaplain who's out in Las Vegas. I think it was an Air Force base that was out there. Got a hold of their duty chaplain, and within 30 minutes, I had a chaplain there at her bedside, meeting with her and her father. And he was a Catholic priest, and he ended up doing the funeral mass for them. But again, one of those real proud moments and very satisfying moments that even from across the country, I could provide pastoral care for one of my flock. Because we have it's kind of a unique arrangement where we used to say cooperation with compromise, which I think is a good motto for the chaplain corps, where I don't have to be a priest, I don't have to be a rabbi, But what I need to do is contact that rabbi, contact that priest, and have them take care of their member. And then if they're not there, then I take care of them the best way I can. But in a situation like that, from even across the country, I could reach out to a fellow chaplain and have somebody there within 30 minutes was pretty incredible to be able to offer something like that to somebody in need.
Mm-hmm. And all of these stories have illustrated just how important this work is. What does that mean for service members who are both deployed and stateside to have this access to the sacraments and to the Word of God through chaplains like you?
Well, that is a great question, and that's something that's asked quite often, because chaplains we're 100% confidential, and so you have people that reach out to us who may have no religious affiliation at all. They may not even be a person of faith, but they know that the chaplain is a person to talk to, who has that open door, who's a confidential resource, and can offer peace and perspective. But for a lot of our people, they're away from home, they're away from family and friends, often for the first time, and they really need somebody that can be there for them, that can listen to them, that can comfort them, that can offer word and sacrament to them. They really, really need that. Because you take, for example, somebody who grew up in Iowa, and now they find themselves in Virginia, and they just can't get home to be with the pastor, to be with the family, but they need somebody, and they need that gospel, and they need that sacrament. They need those things. And they come to realize that because life in the military is hard, and they face some really harsh things all the time. I'm reminded of my Coast Guard brothers and sisters that, you think of the Coast Guard and you think, oh, that's a nice, safe service. But they're going out in some pretty rough conditions, going out in the middle of hurricanes. You're going out to some of these fishing vessels, and the accidents they're really bad accidents when they do happen. And they have a lot to try to process because they're recovering bodies. They're doing things that are pretty difficult to do, and they need that comfort. They need that peace that Christ offers to them. They need that reassurance of everlasting life. That these things matter. As we talk about in the 1 year series coming up this Sunday, where we talk about whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me also. That they're out there doing that each and every day, when they don't realize the importance of what they're doing. So we can bring that peace to them, and even our senior members. I had the admiral that I served with in the 5th District of Coast Guard District 5. We would meet once a month, and we would sit down for an hour, and we would talk about the struggles that he was having, and we would talk about family, and we would talk about Coast Guard things, and we would talk about world events, and we would talk about everything. But he needed that sounding board. He needed somebody to just sit and talk with that wasn't going to judge, that wasn't going to point a finger at him, but maybe gently nudge him in one direction or another, or reassure him that he was going in the right path. But even our senior members, they need that because as we think about the mental health aspect of military service, it affects everybody. It affects all ranks. So they need that person to talk with. They need that person to offer them hope.
And that brings us to a good point. We have just about a minute and a half left, Chaplain. But for those of us lay people in the congregations, how can we be supportive of our veterans? What should we know? Are there things we should do or not do as we want to recognize and support our veterans in the congregations around us?
Well, that's a great question. Because one of the worst questions you can ask somebody when they come back from Iraq or Afghanistan is to say, hey, did you kill anybody? What was it like to kill people? That's that's a pretty awful question to ask. So please don't do that. Refrain from that because that's a pretty private thing. But to just be there to talk with them and ask them to tell those stories, tell those sea stories. Just be available for them and realize that they may have done some things that they're not proud of, that they struggle with. So to be an open ear, to listen to them, to listen to their stories. And they'll share with you as you feel comfortable. As they feel comfortable sharing those stories, they'll let you in as far as they feel comfortable. But just listen, encourage them to tell their stories, encourage them to talk about their time in the service. And if they don't want to talk about it, don't press them, don't push them, because it's some pretty private stuff that a lot of our service members are carrying with them. So just be mindful of that, but encourage them, talk with them, celebrate Veterans Day and Memorial Day, and realize those are two totally different holidays. But just talk with them and listen to their stories.
Our guest today, Chaplain Eric Malmstrom, recently retired from the U.S. Navy. Chaplain Malmstrom, thank you so much for your service. Thank you for being our guest on the Coffee Hour today.
Oh, you're welcome, and God's blessings to you.
You're listening to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support the Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit KFUO.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@KFUO.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.